Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, the only thing this detective is boiling is some potatoes. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, you know me, just mashing my potatoes, putting butter.
Get it because he's Irish.
Because he's Irish, and you can make that joke because you're Irish. So
I can. Well, a fourth, which is enough.
Right.
I looked it up. It's in the bylaws.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
This week on the show, our time with Stephen King's crime fiction comes to an end as we take a look at the first season of the adaptation of Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes, called, it's called Mr. Mercedes.
That was a good choice.
Yeah, I agree. We watched the first season of this show, which is 10 episodes that basically encompass the first book in its entirety, and we're going to talk about it. We have a lot to say, Matt. So much to say. First, though, what is Mr. Mercedes all about?
It's about a demented killer taunts a retired police detective with a series of lurid letters and emails, forcing the ex-cop to undertake a private and potentially felonious crusade to bring the killer to justice before he can strike again.
A lot of adjectives.
I did it all in one breath.
That's a lot of adjectives. This show was created by David E. Kelly. It stars Brendan Gleeson, Holland Taylor, Jarrell Jerome, and Harry Treadway as Brady Hartsfield. Matt, what did you think of Mr. Mercedes?
Complicated feelings. I think in the end I came out enjoying a lot of what they did, and having some definite gripes. Biggest gripe, I'll just get it out of the way, is this did not need to be 10 episodes of what felt like an hour long each. I don't actually remember how long they were each.
I think they were about an hour long each. Yeah,
that's 10 hours of show for a story that I just don't feel like it's supported. I like some of their adaptational choices. I was okay with others of their adaptational choices. Overall positive. Not a rave review so far, but I think I enjoyed watching it generally, though. How about you?
Good. Yeah, I actually really liked it. So yeah, I people that may have forgotten, obviously Matt had never watched the show before, but neither had I. I had read these books, but had never watched the show. And I didn't know this was David E. Kelly, which is a name you might not recognize, Matt, but here's some shows you might recognize.
Okay.
LA Law, Boston Legal, The Practice, Ally McBeal. This is a guy who is like in the legal procedural world. Like he's the guy. Like this is what he does.
It's really funny. Yeah, that was the list of the law shows. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Although not so much detective shows though. Really,
no.
Right?
No. I mean, he has kind of done a little bit like some detective shows as well. But yeah, it's mostly been legal shows. Like he most recently did a show on Apple TV called Presumed Innocent, which was a remake of a 1990s Harrison Ford legal procedural called Presumed Innocent. Really good. I really enjoyed it. But I was surprised. I did not know this was David E. Kelly, and then I booted up the first episode, and I'm like, oh, this is like, so we're doing like the Prestige TV thing, which is exactly what we're doing here, right? This is taking Stephen King's hard-boiled detective story and making a prestige legal character study out of it.
Yeah,
and I liked it a lot. It is different in a lot of ways, and it is really interesting in the ways that it does make adaptive choices. Not that I don't like hate. There's some that are very, very different. I kind of agree with you. There were moments throughout these 10 episodes where I really felt some of these episodes really start to drag, where I was like, do we need this much of this? But then there's moments like with a lot of these characters that I didn't realize why we were spending so much time with them. And then at the end it worked, like Frobisher and Lou are two characters that I think the show spends a lot more time on than the book does.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, why are we doing this? to what end? And then I ultimately found it satisfying.
I agree. So that's probably my favorite change that they made, was giving those two characters a lot more screen time, a lot more to do. There was essentially a whole subplot involving drama at the discount electronics
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
corporate upheaval, which actually I thought played nicely into what we kind of pointed out were the themes of the story
Hmm,
of
hmm.
sort of an unstable world, a lot of anxiety around work and money and the economy. That was all stuff from the book, but they amplified it and uh, expanded on it in the show in a way that I found quite appropriate, right? Like sometimes you expand on a show and you're like what does this have to do with anything? This I totally got it. I liked it. I liked Lou a lot. Like I felt a lot for Lou in a way that I just didn't at all in the book because she has like, 3 lines in the book basically.
She's very,
Um
very one note in the book,
very one note
and
in the book.
a great character, in the show, actually.
Yeah. I agree. Frobisher was another like really you kind of like you love to hate him guy, but also he wasn't just a cardboard cutout villain. He was like he was an asshole, and you hated him, but he seemed like a realistic type of person.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
not yeah. I don't know. And I thought that it all played so interestingly with Brady being the character here because. And maybe this is my favorite thing to talk about regarding the show and maybe regarding the book to an extent is like it's treading this really interesting line, which I feel like a lot of crime fiction does,
Hmm.
where we're playing with sympathizing with the villain,
Sure.
like sort of playing footsie with sympathizing with the villain, where there's situations where maybe he's it's ambiguous. Like is he acting out of protective instinct for Lou? Maybe a little bit, but also not really. It's an interesting gray area where
Yeah, you're talking about when he gets the asshole killed. He's kind of following him with the car,
when he
and
gets yeah,
yeah,
exactly. That guy,
and then
and
even Frobisher to a certain extent, like
yeah.
it, yeah. I mean, I think I love the depiction of Brady Hartsfield field
Mhm.
in this show. I love it. Like Harry Treadaway is a character, or an actor that I don't think I've had ever seen before. Apparently, he was in like the 2013 Lone Ranger remake, but I don't remember what he was in that movie. But I don't really recall ever seeing this guy, and I was kind of blown away by him. I think he is like different than the Brady I imagined in my head. Um, I think that the show does a very good job of making him seem very capable, but also very stupid, which I thought was very in line with the book Brady. But like, I don't know, the just kind of the way his attitude, the way he talks, the way he holds himself, like the music he listens to, all that kind of stuff. Just for whatever reason, my brain didn't imagine that stuff for Brady Hartsfield, but it really works. I think it really works. He definitely comes off as like a child. I think they aged him down. I think they aged a lot of people down in this. Actually, Holly is 31 in this when she's middle aged in the book, but um, I was really really into his performance and his look. Like I don't know, he's got like a look, and like I don't mean this as an insult because this is an actor thing, but he's got like buck teeth, which just go like supports the feeling you get from him, like the childishness of it a little bit, right? Like his teeth are a little bit too big for his face. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it all just kind of works really, really well.
He's one of these actors who really knows what his face looks like on camera.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he could, when he was being the ice cream man, he kind of just looked like an all-American guy
Mm-hmm.
because of the way he's holding his face. And then when he's, alone in his computer room, it's just, he looks like a zombie, right? Like he's letting everything kind of go slack and letting his eyes be dead. But also he could be very expressive and he could be very angry. I think that was one element of this portrayal of Brady that was not what I picked up from the book, was that he's a lot more angry,
Yeah.
which again was a choice that I ended up liking. It just makes him feel more human and less of a sort of object of ridicule, because we spent a lot of time just kind of laughing at what a dipshit he was, which
Yeah.
was fine, but it does make him seem more, formidable and thus like an actual threat to Hodges and to our other characters in this movie.
Yeah,
So
and he does make mistakes in the show, but I think the mistakes are much different. Like in the book, the mistake he makes with the poisoned meat is like a calculated one of like, oh, my meat is going to be safe here in this freezer in the garage that I know my mother never checks, so I'm safe there. Whereas in the show, the mistake was, he came home, his house is on fire. He's not thinking the police are there. He just tosses the burgers in the freezer without thinking about it and then forgets they're there. Right.
Mhm.
And so those are two different ways of making the same mistake. But it comes off in this one as maybe a little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, it's like, you fucking idiot. Of course she's going to check the fridge out there, you dummy. Like, but this one is like, he wasn't making a calculated choice there. He was just reacting.
Right.
And his reaction was ultimately what caused the problem.
Yeah. And I thought that was a good, just a story moment that made sense, because
Yeah.
he's acting rashly because he's having to cover for his alcoholic mom, who starts a fire in the house, and then the cops come, and like you see the stress that he's under. It's one of those ways in which we play with sympathy,
Yeah.
where you're like, oh man, that sounds really stressful, and then you're like, okay, but I don't actually feel bad for this guy, do I? It's I definitely felt more sorry for Brady. That's not true. So the one thing the show didn't do is we didn't really go fully into his backstory with his little brother.
Yeah.
We did
see
it a little
the
bit.
shadows of it.
We see the idea that he choked and he had brain damage, and then the kid dies, and it's Brady's fault probably. I'm not
Yeah.
even entirely convinced that the show conveys that Brady was the one who killed his brother.
It's heavily implied, but
Yeah.
no, it doesn't come right out and say it.
So all that, and which is all fine. That didn't bother me. It's just that was the one time in the book that we felt the most like, I guess I'll give you a poor kid, because no kid deserves to have this happen to them, but then he chooses to be a giant piece of shit when he grows up. So so he loses that sympathy. But so the show didn't have that, but it did sort of have like more emphasis on his terribly messed up relationship with his mom.
Yeah.
And that being a source of, and also I think just the way he was kind of abused by Frobisher, and just kind of has a raw deal in life. That was most of the stuff where you kind of feel like, I don't know. I keep like choking on the words, like you feel bad for him, but like you do, but then he always does something horrible, but then they hit you again with showing you how shitty his life is, and then he does
Yeah.
something horrible, and it's like this seesaw the whole show that somehow still worked on me. I guess I'm just a slow learner. But I liked all that stuff.
No, totally. I think that is all by design too. I mean, especially like you get a moment where he gets his mom off the wagon. Like she has probably always temporarily managed to stop drinking again, and seems to be really trying to make a go at it. And he ends that because it's inconvenient for him.
Mhm.
And it's like, wow, you are a monster. Like it is amazing how the human brain works, because like I am fully aware that this man has murdered a lot of people
Mhm.
and is in an incestuous relationship with his mother. And then like he does that where he buys her the bottle of vodka and shows it to her, and I'm just like, you motherfucker. It's like, wait, on the list of bad things that he's done, this is like way down. And yet in the moment the show is working on me so well that I'm just
Yeah.
like, how could you do that? And I think that's one of the things, we talked about, yeah, maybe this is too long, maybe 10 episodes, maybe an hour long episodes is too much, but like we do get the time in these 10 episodes to hang out with these characters a lot. Like basically a day in the life of Deborah Hartsfield, I thought was a very, very effective storytelling moment, right? Where we get to see her on her, okay, I'm going to get sober. I go on this date with this guy who is just a complete scumbag, just a
Yeah.
complete scumbag. And like hoping that maybe there's hope for me. And then Brady kind of destroys that. And then so the moment that we all know that was coming, the moment of her death, I found incredibly affecting. Like, it's not that I didn't find the book scene like just disturbing and awful, but like, I don't know, I felt like when I was watching her die, I was imagining the woman who like got out of the car and straightened her dress and walked excitedly towards the salon again, thinking maybe she could get her job back and maybe she could turn it all around and maybe this is the time. And that's the woman I was thinking about as I watched her choke on her own blood and
Yeah.
die. And it's like that scene was incredibly done and really fucked me up.
I agree. That was one of the many things in the show where I had the uh, honestly somewhat unusual experience of being like, wow, this is exactly the way it was in the book, and yet because it's visual, it's hitting
Hmm.
me way harder.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's almost a sales pitch for the idea of doing an adaptation because just the, I guess the way we're wired, if we see it, if we see the characters feeling that, see the actors portraying that, it just hits us harder. That
Well,
was great. I
even the
agree.
opening scene, I think, is that way too. Like the baby, like the freaking
Mhm.
like. I knew a baby died. I read it. It affected me emotionally when I read it. But yeah, there's something much different when you see a woman holding their baby in their arms as a tire speeds towards them.
Yeah. Agree with all that. Yeah, it's funny when I say that the show, was overlong. I'm not really talking about. Okay, I'll be blunt. I'm talking about one aspect of the show, which is going to be shocking to 2 weeks ago, Matt, who hadn't watched this show yet, and would have guessed that the best part of the show is going to be Brendan Gleeson playing uh, Hodges. Turns out I didn't feel that way about Brendan Gleeson's performance of Hodges. Well, I shouldn't say the performance. The performance was good. It was more the interpretation that I didn't like, where he's just this miserable sad sack
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's mean and it's a slog. And I
He's
said I was talking to one of our friends about this the other day, and I said the Brady parts are like a breath of fresh air compared to the ongoing misery that is the Hodges parts, which I don't feel. I feel like that's pretty breaking pretty strongly from the spirit of the book, honestly.
It is really interesting, and we kind of prefaced this whole conversation last week when we were talking about who Bill Hodges is in that book. It is a very different interpretation. It is like there's a lot of changes they made to the show. I think the character of Bill Hodges is the most dramatic shift from book to show for sure. Um, I mean, and it's not even to say that Bill Hodges in the book was not this way like prior to the start of the book. I think we are led to believe he was kind of that person, this miserable sad sack. But the thing that happens in the book is very quickly the introduction of Brady Hartsfield and the Mercedes killer and the case again revitalizes Bill Hodges almost instantly, and he just stops being that person. And that's not what this show does. That's not what this show does at all. He remains this person for a very, very good chunk of the show, if not arguably the entire thing. And you're right. Like first of all, the the opening theme music and sequence is like the most wild thing. Like I love it, but I was so put off by it at first because I think the first 3 episodes, I don't think I realized what was going on, and I thought that this was just we were just watching the show. I didn't think this was the opening credits
Uh-huh.
sequence of the show. And I felt like I was having deja vu. I felt like I was going insane. And then it shifts and changes over the course of the thing. But like this is like your declarative statement for what the tone and what the goal of the show is going to be. And what it is Bill Hodges like being a miserable sack of shit, with a messy, awful house and like a life in shambles. And like, again, that's not false to who he was prior to the start of things.
Yeah.
But I I do think it's interesting that we also get the feeling that he was like this before he retired as well.
Yeah. They amplify a lot of these things. So,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
example, the only thing we know about his daughter is that he feels like he failed her as a father, and that they don't really talk very much. I think no, that's not even
Yeah.
true. She calls once a week in the book.
Yeah.
She
Mm-hmm.
distinctly calls once a week. So they still have a relationship. It's just not a good. It's not a good relationship.
Yeah.
He feels bad about it. In the show, it's like he feels like he's just a horrible father. He has no relationship with his daughter. He completely let her down, and he just seems like he regrets his whole life.
Well, she's an addict who is in rehab.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's a big change.
yeah, yeah.
That it's not just that he has this feeling that he's failed her. It's that her life is kind of screwed up.
Right.
But I don't know, Matt, like I struggled with this because then we have sequences where he's like giving Holly a tour of her bedroom, and it's like, well, she really loved the star in the sky, so I did this for her. And it's like, oh, well, that was nice of you, Bill.
Yeah, but
Maybe
then
you weren't such a bad dad.
he follows that up with like, but nothing means anything, and life is pointless. So who cares?
Well, and there's also like this entire like I'm not here to try to argue that Bill was actually a wonderful father. Like that's not the argument I want to make. But the one sequence where we see the flashback of her getting arrested, and like I don't know, man, I'm kind of on his side with this. Like if this is her third DUI
Yeah,
in a few months, she's on a path that's going to end up with someone getting killed. And like, yeah, he could pull strings and keep her out of prison. And yes, going to jail is in and of itself not going to fix her. But like, at some point, something's got to give, right? So
yeah,
like, if the point of this sequence was to make me like be like, oh yeah, you fucked up, Bill, it didn't work that way on me.
yeah. I agree with that. I agree with all that. It's like, what is his arc, right? Because
Yeah.
he doesn't what is he going towards? What is he going away from? Like the Mercedes killer thing, far from like being a kind of pick me up that reinvigorates him, it seems like it just kind of makes him crazy. Like there's all these scenes where he's like the scene where he draws a gun on the kid in his backyard, and like the
Yeah.
cops come
Yeah.
by and they're like, you're an alcoholic who's waving his gun around in his backyard. What's wrong with you? Um, God, yeah, I don't know, man. Lots
I
of
mean,
weird. So yeah, go ahead.
no, I just like the the like through line of the Bill character in the book is he, you know, loses everything on his retirement. He has no friends. He has no family. He's miserable and alone at home, and his life has no meaning. He finds meaning through the case, but eventually finds meaning through friendships with both Jerome and with Holly. Right, and that's the emotional beat we leave Bill Hodges on in the book. Is that like, yes, he's not a detective anymore. He's going to have to find meaning in life outside of investigating crimes, but he has Holly. He has Bill, or he has a Jerome, and he has hope for the future, right? It's not that the ending of this is very different from that. I feel like his relationship with Jerome is really good, and I think it spent some time with Holly as well. But he's such a like prickly asshole that like there's a couple times when I'm like, Holly, why do you like him? Like,
Yeah,
now, yes, she's nice. Yes, he's like nice to her, but like a lot of the last few episodes and a lot of the show as a whole, in Jerome's case, is him telling them to go away and to stop helping him and to get out of here, and like yelling at them like he's yelling at a dog that won't leave him alone, right?
yeah,
And that I think hurts the overall like feeling of like, oh, it's okay, life's okay now because he has friends, especially since the way we leave Bill Hodges in this is like he's still obsessed with the Mercedes killer. Like,
right.
and I'm not saying the further books won't do this, Matt, that he doesn't like become a guy that's going to be constantly checking in on Brady Hartsfield, but that's not where we leave him in the book. Like that's a beat to be picked up later in the further stories, but that's the beat we leave Bill with here, which is him like whispering into Brady's ears, like, you ever fucking wake up, man, I'll be there. Like he's just
Yeah,
as obsessed with him as he was at the beginning
yeah.
still.
I mean, it's interesting because the Bill Hodges character flaws in the book were almost more like he's almost too detached, too cold and calculating, and like almost mechanical, and he needs to
Mm-hmm.
be humanized through friendship. And this guy is a raving asshole who throws cans at people's heads to get their attention when they're making noise on a Saturday
And
morning.
who's yelling at, like he's literally an old man yelling at kids playing hockey in the street. Like it's like they go to one of the most stereotypical examples
Yeah.
of old angry man.
I think one of the scenes that bothered is maybe too strong a word, but that stuck out to me as being inconsistent with the book portrayal the most in a way that I don't know, I guess just didn't like, frankly, was when he goes back to apologize to Jerome, but like can't actually apologize. And finally Jerome is like, uh, uh, Hodges is like, I apologized. And Jerome's like, no, you didn't. And he's like, fine. And then he actually apologizes. And the whole thing was like, he comes off as like a petulant kind of like immature old man who's really not in charge of his faculties and kind of losing it,
Yeah.
which is in contrast to, like, again, Bill Hodges. I really in the book saw him as like this gunslinger where he's like, his fault is the opposite of all of that stuff. His fault is that he takes his job too seriously, and he's too um monomaniacal about it in a way where he's like, I'm going to get my man, not even out of like passionate intensity for wanting justice, but just like, I will he just that's just who he is.
Yeah.
He is a detective. That is his identity. I don't
I
know.
mean,
I don't know. The thing is, these are all like aesthetics and preferences and stuff. So really, I can see someone watching this and like really digging this portrayal. And it's not even Brendan Gleeson's performance. Like I said, like it's
oh, he's
actually
great.
yeah, exactly. There's actually a lot of great moments where I'm like, that's a fantastic moment of acting. Like this is a great moment. It's just, I found it so like depressing, honestly, because of like okay, I think this is really one thing I wanted to say is like, in a thing like this, you kind of want to balance the tone somewhat, where like you're following around the mass murderer, and then you've got to have a little bit of lightness. I'm not saying make it jokey joke time, but you got to have like a polarity to it, where there's like, a serial killer lives in a dingy shithole of a house with his mom who molests him, and then the other pole. And it's like, no, in this case, they were both depressing, horrible nightmares
Hmm.
of just slightly different flavors. And 10 hours of that is just exhausting.
Yeah, and I mean, we still have the Janie stuff, right? Like, he still has a relationship with Janie, and I really like his relationship with Janie. And I think we need to talk about her here in a bit. They did a thing where they added another character to the show. His neighbor Ida Silver, played by Holland Taylor, who is like a just incredible character actress, like a very famous longtime actress who I love. And I think she's great in this, honestly. And like, I like the character in this. I like the decision to include this woman in his life that's like basically like, hey, I can make you happy. And him just constantly batting her away. I think one of the perhaps intended, perhaps unintended consequences of this is that when he does eventually get with Janie, they use that as a moment of character work for Ida, where she sees him with this younger woman and is like embarrassed and distraught. And like, I think it's like a good dramatic beat in the story. But what it does is, I think, undermines exactly what they were trying to do with what you're talking about, which is like show Bill getting happy again. It's like, well, now I feel bad about him being happy, actually, because it hurt
Mhm.
this other woman.
Yep. Exactly. And it's once I don't even know what the purpose of that was, other than to give us a brief moment of sadness on behalf of this character. It's because I don't
Mhm.
really feel like that built toward anything with her character. She's mad at him for a while, an episode or two, and hurt by it, and then she comes back around toward being like, yeah, I'm over it, and then it all just ends up kind of being like nothing. Like there's no advancement, right? She doesn't take
Yeah.
any action based on that. Like it's not
Mhm.
like, because she did that, because Hodges did that to her, she, you know, takes some action or does something she wouldn't otherwise have done that then has plot consequences. It really is just kind of, my less favorite kind of an adaptational choice, where it's just they've just changed something for the sake of changing it and adding in a little bit of kind of pointless drama.
Yeah, I think pointless drama is the right phrase for it. I mean, like I said, I like the character. I think the character solves a problem, which is you really want like it allows you to have some of Bill's internal thoughts turned into dialogue. And it's like stuff like when I can almost imagine them trying to break the script and being like, okay, we want to we need to say this stuff so people know Bill is feeling this way, but this is not a appropriate conversation to have with 17-year-old Jerome, right? Um, Also, Holly, it just wouldn't work for him to be like bearing his soul to Holly this way. So like we need something. And so, oh, we could have a neighbor character. She's his age. They have an interesting relationship, so he feels comfortable kind of divulging his innermost thoughts to her. And then okay, well, we have to have her do something. What are we going to do? And then they build the stuff around what originally was a problem solving measure. And like I said, it's effective that way. But yes, in this case, it's just like this felt like drama in the moment to like almost to cynically to like get you to tune in next week type stuff.
Yes. I mean, I honestly think that's a lot of what TV writing is in the end is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, so, basic principle of storytelling is you've got to create tension, like mass, keyword of storytelling. So it's like one way to do that is you just have somebody who's mad at somebody for a reason. And it's pretty cheap and easy to do that. And then you kind of, ideally you pay that off, but in this case, there was no payoff. There was nothing. And that was, it's kind of annoying. This is a minor beat, but I
Yeah.
agree with you where I felt the same as you, where it's like, it's kind of important to the functioning of our like getting invested in his relationship with Janie that this be seen by us as positive, like a
Yeah.
good evolution for him. We feel good for him that this is happening. And I felt a lot less clear about all of that, honestly. Like,
I think the relationship is like the weakest part of the show.
I agree. Like,
Unfortunately,
I almost felt like I spaced or something because I was just like, I don't buy them. What am I missing? Like, did I miss a scene?
And I don't think it's Janie's fault. So the Mary Louise Parker actress plays Janie. If you've watched the television show Weeds, she was the lead of that show. Really, really great show that I watched for many years and liked. She's a very interesting actress in like how she holds herself, how she delivers lines. There's like an aloofness to her characters, like all the characters I've seen her play, and I think it actually works very, very well for the show's depiction of Janie. But yeah, there I felt like there was space for me. There was space between the two of them that I never fully bought that this was happening. And I was still like, I still think her death was very tragic. I think the show does a really good job of depicting that shocking, surprising death. I was a little disappointed that Brady, like, we didn't have him like make a mistake and kill her instead of him. It just seemed like he like intentionally just said, "Oh, he's not in the car. Okay, that's fine. I'll just kill her," which boned me out a little bit because I think it's important to see like Brady kind of constantly fuck this kind of stuff up. And it's like it removes that really wonderful moment of the missed me when he first messages Brady. Like that was a really wonderful moment in the book, and we basically had to completely write that out. And instead, that entire scene is Brady gloating about his victory to Bill rather than Bill like turning the screws even tighter, which is a little bit of a bummer. But I really liked it's kind of a gimmick, and I've seen David D. Kelly do this in some of his other shows, but like where you have a character standing up about to give a speech, and then we cut suddenly away from the speech, and they're like, "Oh, I guess we're just not going to do the speech part." Okay, but then they die, and then just to wrap everything up emotionally, we cut back to the speech and get to hear it, even though we've moved on beyond that scene. It's like a trick, but it's a trick that works really, really well on me. By the way, Matt, I don't know if you knew this. The majority of these episodes were directed by a man named Jack Bender. If that's a name that feels familiar to you, it's because he was a producer and director on a little television show called Lost, where he produced 100 and something episodes and directed many, many of them. So if you liked the show, it means you like Lost now. So
Well, I think I was pretty lukewarm on the show, but yeah.
fuck.
um, I guess I just wanted to react to this, what you reminded me talking about. So first of all, I'll react to the last thing you said, which was the director. Like, yeah, it or the producer slash director. It felt very highly produced as a show. It's not something
Hmm.
It's not something we really talked about yet, but like, it's very well made in just like a filmmaking perspective. I felt like it was. It just had that feeling of like you said, prestige TV, good production
Yeah.
values, very solid, shot in a way that felt engaging and nice. I like that just in general. It's one of the strong suits. The point I was going to bring up was, you talked about Brady taunting him, and one change they made was, of course, that it's not just these letters and it's not just the text messages via Debbie's Blue Umbrella. It's these like video messages, and then ultimately culminating in Brady and him having basically a Skype call
Hmm.
a couple times, which I actually liked quite a bit. As they were like building up toward that, I was like, oh, this is going to be super corny and I'm going to hate this. I don't know why I had that reaction actually. Like, I don't know like, I think I just thought this is going to not work. And then it worked,
Hmm.
and it was actually good. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, maybe it's, if I were to nitpick, I would say Brady probably wouldn't take this risk. Book Brady probably wouldn't take this risk, but I don't really care, and I found that it worked, and I liked it, and I liked Brady's
Yeah.
creepy digital mask that he wore, and I liked how Hodges was able to like actually taunt him one on one instead of it being over text. A change you kind of have to make for video versus book, you know.
Yeah.
Made sense to me. I liked it.
That's what I was gonna say. Is I agree. Like, this is a solution to a problem. Honestly, I was surprised they still did the letter, because I
Mhm.
really thought when we went this way, where it was going to be over video and we were going to talk over Skype instead of letter. And then they also did the letter. Like, he reaches out to him with an email at first, like an email with a video in it, and then sends the letter afterwards, which felt weird to me a little bit. That like, it's like, oh, we got to still have the letter in for some reason. But it all worked really well on me. I liked their relationship. But for some reason, like the small little moments of the show are some of the stuff I love the most. And Brendan Gleeson like setting the laptop down and then like sitting in the chair to get the right angle as he's about to call
Uh-huh.
Brady and make sure he's got like the right angle and is looking the most confident and poised. I loved that so much. Um, so I think everything that is created via that, I think, is just very, very good and effective. So yeah, I agree with you. I was expecting to roll my eyes at it a little bit, especially like the cackling smiley face of Mr. Mercedes. Like, I was expecting to think that was a little much, but I really liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like the visual motif of the clown mask
Mm-hmm.
was just an interesting. I mean, it's like the mask was also in the book, but it was, he left the mask in the Mercedes, and it
Yeah.
was like a piece of evidence they had. Whereas in the show, it's that it's like in his house, and his mom reacts to it, and it
Which,
was
by
like,
the way, loved that. Remember we had that conversation about, does she perhaps suspect something?
yeah,
And
love
that
that.
was a great way of showing, without ever actually saying it, that yeah, she thought something was up actually.
Yeah, and he was watching, like, what he was watching on TV when his brother choked was some clown show. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's just, it's not really like necessary, but a kind of a fun way of tying things together and
Yeah.
making you feel like, oh, this is all rooted in his childhood trauma without having to go out and say that, right?
I also really loved like how often the fire truck is just like with him. Like, he just kind of carries it around. Like, it's in his control center with him constantly.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I forgot about that until you mentioned it, but you're totally right. Um,
But we were talking about Bill. We got distracted.
We did, yeah. Bill, yeah, but we're talking about Bill and Janie's relationship. I think did you say aloof? Is that the word you used?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that was the problem. Like, she's aloof, and he is too. like sort of recalcitrant in his assholedom, where like they would have these arguments about like his daughter, and instead of him being like, yeah, you've got a point, I should reach out to her, he'd be like, don't give me advice about my daughter. You're like, oh, okay.
Especially since her lines were so good, right? Like I
Yeah.
think what she says is like, "You're a god to her,"
Yeah.
and he's like, "Not anymore." He's like, "Nope, doesn't matter. Still are." Yeah, all that was really really good, and I agree. Like, I just okay. So like, here's another problem that I think with this map. I think part of what is supposed to be believable here is that it's kind of crazy that this schmuck of a dude would land this super hottie, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that is essentially what we are told in the book, and it's really surprising. It's surprising for Bill, but also we like Bill in the book so much, and he's so personable and friendly and awesome that like we don't really question it that much. It's just mostly like people from the outside would question it. That doesn't work in this show because he's kind of just a prickly asshole. The other thing, though, Matt, is everyone really wants to fuck Bill Hodges. Like, so we have Ida, who like in one of the most awkward yet wonderful scenes ever. Like at the start of the show, is just like, "Hey, you want to do it?"
Uh-huh.
But then also when he goes, now tell me if I'm reading too much into things or I'm not. When he goes for lunch at the pasta place, that waitress wants to fuck the shit out of him. Am I
Uh-huh.
wrong?
No,
She
you're right.
totally does.
She does. She does. There was a weird thing throughout the show, but especially like in the first episodes, weirdly, where like the first conversation that he has with his partner is like, are like, is Bill Hodges ugly? is Brendan Gleeson an ugly old man? I was like, what is this? What is this? This has nothing. I mean, yeah, his weight was an issue in the book,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like it served two purposes. It was like a way of showing that he's kind of let himself go, and then he can't believe that Janie is interested in him, and then she's like, yeah, I have a thing for bigger guys, so it's okay. And then he's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, jackpot. um, um, but in the like, you're right that there's this weird like focus on, I don't want to say weird because that makes me think that makes it seem like I think it's inexplicable and bad. I guess I just don't know how to quite place it, where there was a focus on like appearances. It was actually
Mm.
quite consistent. So maybe let's dig into this for a second, because
Sure.
you know, and I guess it was somewhat in the book too, right? Because like you've got Lou, clearly people see her and they react to her in a negative way, and this is extremely psychologically damaging to her.
Yeah.
um People react to Brady and how he looks interestingly, where like they'll in the book, Brady always sort of like passes as a charming, unoffensive man, young man, whereas
Mm-hmm.
in the show, it's more like, oh, he's just creepy. He's just creepy to look at and creepy to be around, and it's obvious. Um, and that's like a thing that people say. And then Hodges is like old and fat, and that's something that people comment on. And then you've got Jerome. It's interesting. Jerome being black is less like of a defining characteristic of Jerome in the show. I think they just
Yeah.
felt like I think they almost felt like they didn't want to overdo that, so they just kind of let it be. Maybe.
I think they definitely like removed the Jerome's identity crisis portion of his character here. I mean, like it certainly matters
Mhm.
that he's like the first person in his family to get into Harvard, like matters, but that's not a specific race thing at all. And
Yeah.
they cut out all Brady's racism and isms, right? I
Mhm.
don't think Brady ever utters this. This might not be true. I think maybe one or twice he says something, but he doesn't typically utter any slurs, I think.
No, he doesn't. Interestingly, the moment it's his boss that uses a
Yeah, it's
slur.
Frobisher, right? Yeah,
Frobisher
yeah,
uses a slur, and Brady's reaction is actually like fury.
yeah.
I don't think because he's offended by bigotry, but I think it's because he's in that moment. It's like, oh, so you always have been just a piece of shit, and now you're just revealing that you're a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
then he
God,
kills him
it's so
with the
interesting,
hammer.
and I mean, this is part of why I like the show, but like, it is really interesting that like we talked about Lou and his like defense of Lou, and then there's that moment at the end of the show where he stabs Lou in the stomach, and then is about to kill her, but then can't.
Yeah,
He stops himself. Um, that's interesting, right? Like, as far as what we declare Brady is and isn't, what we diagnose him as,
yeah,
he can't kill this woman, and that's ultimately part of what does him in, because she is able to get Hodges' attention and tell him what to look for, and he gets there in time to help
yeah.
stop Brady.
I honestly like that, and I think that's one of the
Yeah,
compelling things about this story, and um, the kind of thing that King likes to do with his villains. And I think this is a particularly a successful example. Honestly, is like it he there's enough of a spark of humanity left in this poor, sort of tortured, broken person
yeah,
that he can stab this person who obviously liked him, actually,
yeah,
and who he maybe liked in some way, through all the darkness of his soul. There was something in him that liked her too, and he could stab her, but he couldn't kill her. It was just some boundary too far, even for him, even as far gone as he was. And that doesn't mean, oh, he's an angel, but it does mean there's something vaguely like poignant about that idea.
yeah,
That maybe there can be some kind of redemption, even if it's not, you know, real redemption or full redemption. It's like the one spark of goodness that he had in him undid the evil, really. Because I mean, if you take it literally, it's like, yeah, that sparing her led Hodges to expose him, and then
yeah.
he didn't succeed in killing everyone, and got his brain bashed in. So
Yeah. It, it is really interesting that she, like, when Bill comes to her with, hey, I think I think your best friend is not a good person, like, she is adamant that he's wrong, right?
mm,
And I think that is a change from the book, right? I don't think she, she didn't like say that he was the Mercedes killer, but like, she, along with Frobisher, were both like, yeah, he's like really weird about his mom and stuff like that, you know? We're told in the book, because we see his relationship with Lou through his perspective, that he basically can't stand her and is just like bullshitting and putting the smile on and pretending, which is what he has done his entire life. We don't get to see that in the show, and we're forced to conclude, and I think accurately in the world of the show, that his relationship with Lou was real, that they were friends in a kind of weird way. um and and I think that the ending confirms it, right? Like, she felt strong feelings of friendship towards him, and he felt them in return, and like, that certainly is a wrinkle in his character that is hard to really settle with, but I like it. I like how it complicates this guy. I thought what you said at the beginning was great, how we kind of seesaw between feeling for him and being disgusted by him.
mm,
It's
yeah,
really good stuff. It really makes for a compelling villain. That, like, I mean, I hated Frobisher. I hated him. He was awful, and I was kind of glad when Brady bashed his fucking head in. Like,
uh-huh.
and then you take a step back from that and go, whoa, wait, no. And I was actually really, really hoping that the stupid regional manager guy was gonna get murdered too, because I fucking hated that guy too. Um, and this is what stories do to you, right?
Yeah, the regional manager thing was great because we leave him um like being demoted effectively,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
which is just weirdly satisfying. Um, yeah, Frobisher being I agree that I had such complex feelings about him getting bashed in the head because he sucked and he was a bad boss, but definitely didn't deserve to die.
No.
But you do feel that moment of satisfaction I don't know. So I kept referencing Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon back when we talked about the book, and at a certain point, I cut myself off because I felt like I was doing it too much. But I think because now I'm allowed to do it again because now we're talking about a different piece of art, which is the show. Um, and I'll say like that was some of like the satisfying stuff that happens in Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon is like some character who you really don't like. For example, the tabloid journalist in Red Dragon,
Yeah.
where the film uses every trick of film to make you hate this guy, and then gives him a horrible, horrible, horrible death, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I didn't like him, but that's a bit much. And it puts you in a very weird emotional space. And this show did the same thing to me. And I kind of enjoy that. I enjoy being willing to go there.
Yeah, that was God, what was his name in Silence of the Lambs? The doctor, his psychiatrist or whatever.
Um, I
Chilton. I just looked it up. Yeah.
well, Chilton. So I'm thinking
Chilton's
of,
not the one that dies, is he?
no, I'm thinking of the character who was played by Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in Red Dragon, the tabloid journalist who Philip Seymour Hoffman makes sure that you hate him, and then he's horribly murdered, tortured, and burned, and it's just awful. So
Yeah, and that's Frobisher, right? That like, was I happy that he's dead? Maybe.
Yeah.
Did I think, oh Jesus? Also, yes. And this is the greatest thing is like when Holly beans him on the head at the end with the dog statue, which great. I was like, it was really funny because as we were building up to that moment, I was watching this with my wife, and she's like, "There's no happy slapper. What's she gonna hit him with?" And then Holly takes the bulldog statue out of her purse, and I'm like, "Oh, of course, this is what we were doing. This is why we set this thing up. It's perfect." And man, she beans him multiple times. I was like, I literally said, "Come on, Holly, you got to get a second one in." And then she hits him a second time, and then she does it 2 more times. I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, Holly, maybe that's a little too much."
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. So that you remind me about one element which I feel mildly vindicated that I brought this up a couple times when we were talking about the book, because she says in the show, actually doesn't Brady's mom also say this, where they're like, I get feelings sometimes?
Yes, both
and
of
it's
them.
like you're talking about The Shining.
Yeah,
So Holly in the show anyway does have The Shining textually.
I mean,
100%.
I don't know about that.
She got the bulldog. Why else did she get the bulldog?
She carries it with her everywhere because it makes her feel nice.
Is the idea that Hodges kind of looks like a bulldog?
I don't know. I think we're actually told she's got this shine-like feeling, and that's why the bulldog is comforting to her. But psychologically, yes, it could be that it's kind of like that. Looks like what Brendan Gleeson looks like. It doesn't. She doesn't. I don't want to do this. She doesn't have the shine, Matt. This is just a detective story. That's all it is.
Look, this way I get to be right. So
okay, fine.
Yeah. So the ending sequence bothered me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't think this is a nitpick. I mean, it is a nitpick, but the ending sequence in the whole idea in the book was like, well, we can't tip our hand to reveal that that we know Brady's there, because as soon as he knows that people are after him, he'll just detonate the bomb. And then in the show, instead of doing that, Brendan Gleeson is immediately yelling and waving his gun around, and then Brady just kind of turns around and stares at him, and then he like holds his hand away from the detonator. And the whole time I was just like, just shoot him shoot him immediately. Like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
And then Holly hits him, but Holly hitting him in that moment to me just felt confusing, because I was literally like, there was no reason that Hodges couldn't shoot him, right? Am I missing something?
No, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking just you can shoot him right now. Right now, you can shoot him. I
Yeah.
mean, look, I think it's absolutely true that everyone in this show behaves dumber than their counterparts in the book. That it just seems like everyone in the book is just a little bit smarter. Um, that is definitely true, and I think Bill Hodges is a victim of that as well. It feels like, we talked about this when we talked about the book. This is like it is such a move to subtract your protagonist from the climax of the story.
Mhm.
And it's like the whole time I'm like, there's no way they're going to do that in this television show. There's just no way. And then they start doing the heart attack stuff, and I'm like, oh, maybe they are actually, because like they really start with the heart attack flags like really early, Matt. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how heart attacks work. I feel like they start playing that stuff like 2 days before he has a heart attack. Like there's that one time he wakes up and is like his arm's a little sore, and then he takes some antacid tablets, and you're like, uh-oh. But that felt like that was like 2 days before the events of the climax. But it's interesting because ultimately the purpose of the heart attack is just so he stops Brady, then passes out, and that's basically it. But they also still wanted to do the Holly moment as well. So it did feel a little weird where they like wanted to have their cake and eat it too, where they wanted to have Bill Hodges play a key role in the climax of the story, but also they wanted Holly to get to beat him on the head with something, because that's such a iconic moment in the book, and it matters for the character of Holly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I essentially just reiterate that the climax felt a little bit muddy, and especially considering that I felt like it was so clean and well executed in the book. I was like, that's
Yeah.
one of the selling points of the book to me is, like you just said, this really unusual choice of removing your protagonist and then having like a subtle and complex game of cat and mouse where somebody's got to sneak up on the guy, but it can't be anybody that they expect or know. And so you have this one person who can do it, but she is like the last person in the world that you would trust with a
Mm-hmm.
assassination mission. But that's all we've got. And that's like a fantastically dramatic situation. There's
Yeah.
if I were adapting this, there's no way I would cut that out. That's it. That's just perfect. And they didn't do it. So I don't know. I didn't ruin the show for me or anything, but I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I guess that was fine.
No, I get you, especially because Holly's not there for any kind of greater reason. She just wanted to go to this art thing, which, by the way, the the location of the climax is like the one moment in the show to me that it showed its lack of money. Like obviously they couldn't do like a big huge concert with thousands of people. Like that's just from a production standpoint completely impractical. But this space, like this arts center, felt really strange to me. Like really strange. And it felt very, very small. Like the point is that Brady is going to do something that is going to like kill thousands and thousands of people, right? This is his big goodbye. And this just felt like very, very small. Like it would be more than the Mercedes killing, which by the way, they upped the body count in the Mercedes accident by a lot. I think they more than doubled it. I think like 18 people die,
Mhm.
and that was way more than died in the book. But um, it felt small. It felt weird, and like this kind of, I don't know, like faux outdoorsy. Like I don't know what the purpose of this building is. I guess is what I'll say. Like they're talking about like this is going to revitalize downtown, and we're going to showcase art here. Like, but what do you mean? It's all outside. This is like a rundown building that you just like put a painting on one wall. I What is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that also didn't work on me. I agree because I always feel like it's a cynical ploy by the, you know, town officials to say like, basically they have some money and they're like, okay, we'll just spend that money on like a space and then we'll claim we revitalize downtown and then no one uses the space and it becomes a drug hangout. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that didn't work on me, but I also it didn't bother me because I just immediately stopped thinking about it.
Sure. I mean, very fair. It just like it felt small and contained,
Yeah,
and like I just it felt weird to
yeah,
me.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a degree of spectacle at the end of the book where you have this giant concert, and you another thing, you had was I forget was Jerome's sister at the art thing. I think
She
she was.
was.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, yeah,
So Jerome was like giving a speech
yeah,
at the
yeah,
art thing,
yeah,
and then his sister was in the choir, the middle school choir that
yeah.
came up and sang.
Yeah, so she was still at risk. So that was I just forgot for a second.
But he was at risk too. It's like they Bill decided, and I guess I believe him when he says this, is like the reason why Brady is hitting this thing is because the people that Bill cares about are at this thing. But we never saw Brady make that choice, really.
That's true.
He just like saw this place and decided this would be a great place to have my final sign off.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's all true. The
Um,
Yeah,
I
I don't
did
know.
really like the
Yeah,
fake out though. Like the episode 9. I liked how all that played out when they surround his house and you're like legitimately thinking what are they going to do here actually? I thought all that stuff worked really well. What do you
I
think?
agree. So at first I was ambivalent about the idea that um very much unlike in the books, Hodges goes to the cops at a certain point. He's just like, okay, this is past the threshold where I feel comfortable. I'm going to the cops. And then he's like, basically pestering his partner constantly and sort of playing on their pre-existing relationship to just tag along, even in situations where he probably shouldn't be. Like, I love the bit when they're at the house and he's like, "Do you have a vest?" And then the guy's like, "Absolutely not." And then in the next shot, Hodges is wearing a vest. Um,
Yeah.
so and then he ends up going into the house and like that stuff that probably wouldn't be allowed in real life, but whatever, I don't care. It's television. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think they sold me on all of that because I think it just worked better, visually, and to have him be part of this group. And then I agree, I like the fake out, I like the fire, burning the bed. I like the idea that he used Frobisher's body. um that was all cool. And because I think the main thing that was cool about it is like, since you've read the book, you're sort of hungry for anything that feels like a twist or a surprise.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't feel like it's just being done you know for no reason. And that was like, oh, this is cool. This is like, I honestly liked it better than the idea of the cops accidentally stumble on an ATF terrorism bust, and that's the reason the cops are distracted. This made more sense to me as it's just the cops basically think Brady is already dead until kind of like too late, basically. It might have worked even better, honestly, if his partner had just been like, "Nah, Brady's dead. Forget about it," and then it had just all been on Hodges, right?
Yeah, exactly. That is kind of where I was getting to, because I agree with you. This choice that the show makes to have Bill constantly and regularly go to the police with everything is an interesting one. Especially, that summary you read at the beginning of the episode where it says forcing the ex-cop to undertake a private and potentially felonious crusade. It's like, it's not really though. I mean, like, he basically goes to the police with the letter like right after he gets it, and they're just like making fun of him and calling him crazy.
Mhm.
uh and they don't believe him. And then it becomes, in the last 2 episodes, essentially a police procedural with Bill tagging along with the cops as they investigate different areas, and he helps with that. Obviously, it's Holly and Jerome who give uh discount electronics and sorry, Supreme electronics in the show, not discount electronics. That was
Uh-huh.
great. um they are the reasons why the police are led there. But yeah, it's the cops every step of the way, and that is the interesting part. Like, I thought that's what we were doing. We have him do this fake out death, and I thought we were doing the old trope of like, okay, everyone's gonna, including Pete, is gonna believe that this is it, he's really dead, and the cops are gonna say, okay, we're not investigating anymore. But Bill knows better. Bill knows Brady better. Bill is a better detective, and so he believes that this isn't over. And so he has to strike out on his own with him and his little recruited quartet to figuring out. But then that's not what we do, because it's just more police work that discovers that it was a fake out. And the only rogue that Bill goes at the end is that he's asked by the police to go to the job fair, and he decides halfway there, no, he's going to be at the other place, and like that's it. Which is interesting, because I think there was a lot of commentary that we talked about on critique on the ineffectiveness of the police in this story, and the way the police jump to conclusions and make judgments and are wrong, that allow for bad things to go unsolved. And by making this essentially a procedural, and I think this is the David E. Kelly influence, by the way, he's like so used to living in this world that like this is the way he's going to do it. That is kind of stripped from it, I think, in a way that ultimately hurts the story, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess. No, it's funny to kind of view it in that context, where it's like he can't help but portray the cops and detectives as basically being professional and competent, and it went so much against their instincts to have it just be like, no, the cops are useless here. It all has to be Hodges as the vigilante, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
They just couldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, the most of the reason we see is like the chief of police is going like, this retired detective is better at investigating stuff than you guys. What's your excuse? And Pete's like, other cases. And and like it's not read, and it doesn't come off in a way that's like, oh, so you're just incompetent. It's like, no, like that's a legitimate a reason for this, and like that's one of the struggles of modern crime solving, is that there's just too much crime.
Yeah.
And that is definitely on the side of the police there. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's certainly not. But it's just definitely a change from, I think, where the book had established all this stuff. And I think that's, why this out of nowhere ATF raid serves a purpose in the book in the way it just wouldn't work as well in the show. And so like Pete is much more of like a character in the show than he is in the book. Not that he's not a character in the book, but he plays a much more active role in the goings, to the point where this montage we get at the end of the very last episode stops in on Pete and Izzy at the police station, because they're characters and we want to see how they're doing at the end of the story.
Yeah, Pete is sort of flawed and borderline unlikable in the book, and he's like a totally cool stand-up guy who I think more or less understandably is pushing back against Hodges toward the beginning of the movie, where Hodges is like, I got these letters, and he's just like, it's probably a crank.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a crank, what do you want me to do about it? Honestly, because Hodges seems so unhinged often in the show, it makes you lean more toward Pete's perspective.
Yeah. It seems entirely reasonable for him to be like, hey, buddy, you're not doing well. I mean, and there's the scene when Hodges is like drunk and wasted at the bar, and Pete comes to like take him home, and you get the feeling that this is not the first time Pete had to do this, right? No. Like where this is kind of has been their established relationship from the beginning, and how their partnership played out, which is where not the same in the book. In the book, it's more specifically set up that Bill is kind of like the elderly statesman-y mentor figure to Pete. And that's not what we see here at all.
Yeah. Just on the topic of the chief of police being kind of horrible, I just made this connection in my mind that like one of the ideas of like institutions being kind of overwhelmed and dysfunctional, and the structures of power and authority being specifically dysfunctional. Like we have Frobisher, and Frobisher's bosses are all these horrible tools, and then and then the people on the ground who are actually trying to do the work are just these poor people who are doing their best with a raw deal. And then similarly, the detectives on the police force are doing their best with limited resources, but the chief of police is like totally disconnected and just being like, "Oh, you're making me look bad," what are you doing? And while actually, contributing nothing of value actually. So that I like that. I like how they
Yeah.
connected these things. Like it's worth a lot to me to see that a show has understood some of these more subtle ideas in the thing they're trying to
Hmm.
adapt, and the adaptational changes actually emphasize and reinforce those ideas.
I completely agree. I completely agree. This is every change here feels like it is done not just willy nilly, not just we can fix this and make it better. It is capturing the heart of what this thing is talking about and just doing it from a different perspective and different angle. And yeah, I mean, I think it all works really really well.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, we're approaching the end, but we have to spend some time on Holly Gibney, of course, the most iconic character coming out of this series and into things beyond. Shows up in this show very similar to how she shows up in the book. She's played by a woman named Justine. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Lupe. I don't know. Um, so I have seen two versions of Holly Gibney, Matt, because she also shows up in the novel The Outsider, which HBO made a prestige TV adaptation of that book. And she is played by, God, I just blanked on her name. Oh my God. Cynthia Erivo. There it is. It came back to me. Cynthia Erivo plays Holly Gibney. And they're two very different interpretations of the same character. I like both of them a whole lot. I think the show's interpretation of Holly here, first of all, we already said that they aged her down. She's 44 in the book. She's 31 and a half, sorry, she says, in the show. And I think this actress, whether at direction or just her own creative choices, is really leaning into the childishness of Holly in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way they've got her dressed, she's got a scrunchie on her arm, the way she's holding herself, the way she's talking, still definitely doing the on the spectrum stuff, but really, really leaning into how she's kind of acting like a child. Um, what did you think of the Holly Gibney in this story?
Um, I thought it was fine. I guess, she grew on me. I think it much like the Holly Gibney in the book, where she starts off as this background element so minor that I wouldn't have even thought about her twice if I didn't sort of
Mm-hmm.
know that she was going to play a larger role. Similar to that, where she kind of sneaks up on you, and I think it works very similarly actually to the book, where she grows on you and she kind of starts to grow on Bill,
Yeah.
where she's like inserting herself into his life and he's like exasperated, but also kind of disarmed. And um maybe I'm projecting a bit, but it's like it activates his sort of fathering parenting instincts of
Yeah.
having someone to care about who reminds him a bit of his daughter. Actually, they swerve into that because she ends up going into his daughter's room, and which is not something that happens in the book as far as I remember. And so
No.
there's a more direct identification there.
Yeah, there. I mean, I feel like we did a thing here where we cast two actresses that do look similar. The woman who plays his daughter and this woman, like, we're definitely leaning into the Holly Gibney as daughter surrogate, like a chance to do this thing right this time. Although, she's still there. Your daughter's still there. Um,
Yeah.
but I agree with that. I like her. I think I ultimately enjoy Cynthia Erivo's performance more, which it's tough to talk about with you because obviously you haven't seen them, but like also that version of Holly we're seeing is a Holly much further along in her overall character arc than the Holly we see here. So it's tough to like look at those two comparisons and see this person who I really really liked in The Outsider for the strength that she had, and it's just like, well, that this Holly's just not there yet. She's getting there by the end of this season, right? Like she's on her way to becoming that person. So it's not fair to compare that way. I mean, I think she's close-ish to what the book describes her as. I don't think we saw enough about how horrible and awful her mother is. Like there's moments where it just seems like her mother is just like being a worried, concerned parent. And I was like, no, that's not right. That's not right. Like she's a monster,
Yeah.
actually. I so wanted the scene where she asks Bill if Janie had a will. Like, I so wanted that scene because that scene is so important to establishing just how horrible this woman is.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not like the show is not saying she's horrible. I think it is, but you know, I think I wanted more of it. I wanted, like, this is not just like the kind of petulance of a young child Holly Gibney. This is like, this woman has fucked her daughter up, and
Yeah.
she's trying to get away from her in the way she knows how.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know. This is one of the ways in which I'm not a professional actor. Is that like my sense of Holly Gibney's character is somebody who's just like so closed down and emotional and just like totally tightly wound and emotionally constrained.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be very challenging to portray her in a way that was at all likable, because she's going to, like, if you play her straight as she appears on the page, then she's going to be incredibly off-putting, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a way to thread that needle, but I don't know what it is, and I obviously couldn't do it or couldn't tell someone how to do it. So it makes me hesitate to be like, what you should have done is, because I have no idea. um it makes me curious to see what this other portrayal is that you're talking about. I Is there any reason why I shouldn't just go watch The Outsider, by the way?
No, I mean, not unless you like were like really, really planning on reading the book. I guess it will tell you how things go at the end of the Bill Hodges trilogy. Like,
Hmm.
you will find all that stuff out. But if you don't care about that, you don't.
This is one of the
You can.
downsides of have everything being connected, right?
Yeah. No, definitely,
Because I'd
definitely.
love to just go watch that show, but I don't want to have the Bill Hodges trilogy spoiled for me. So anyway,
Yeah.
um,
I would like. I think it'd be cool to cover that show on like a bonus,
mhm,
like week by week thing,
mhm.
like we're doing with Castle Rock. But yeah, again, I don't know. It's the same with like there are two more seasons of the show, and I would love you to jump in and just watch the other two seasons of the show. Which my understanding is one of them picks up on one of the books in the trilogy, and then the third season like kind of goes off on its own thing.
Mhm.
Interestingly, so I you, it depends on like how spoiler averse you are and aren't, right? I think that's
Mhm.
true with anything. Like, if I had read The Outsider before I read the Bill Hodges trilogy, um, would I have been spoiled on things? Yes. Would that have ruined the experience of any of them for me? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it
Well,
just all depends.
yeah, that's I'm typically not. I think I've said this before that like there's basically two things that I've ever read where I'm really glad that I wasn't spoiled, and other than that, I don't think I would have cared. So
Yeah, I mean, The Outsider is very good. It's a good book that I liked quite a bit, and I think the television show is very, very well done.
cool.
So it's ultimately up to you.
Good to know.
You just let me know, and we'll find out a way to mine content from it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man.
All right. Well, I think we've kind of reached the end of Mr. Mercedes. Anything else you wanted to say? Okay. As I was saying that, I thought of
Yeah.
something. I just want to point out the delightful choice to just make Bill Hodges Irish. Where like I'm thinking the whole time as I'm booting this thing up. Okay, Brendan Gleeson, are they going to make him talk American? Like, I don't. Nobody wants that. And then he opens his mouth, and it's an Irish accent,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, oh, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, this was the right choice. Just let him talk in his accent, and we'll just say he was Irish.
Yeah.
Boom, done.
He's just an Irish man. The end.
Yeah.
The only thing I wanted to say that we didn't mention, which is very brief, is like the uh, power of doing the horrible gore of a car driving through a mass of people and then seeing the aftermath of that
Yeah.
was not something that I imagined, actually, when we like I very much did the like cutaway
Yeah.
when that happens in the book, and the show really shows it. And then like at various times in the show we get like Hodges flashbacks to stuff that he saw, and then he has that dream at one point where he sees all this heinous shit. So the show is
Yeah.
surprisingly effective in using like just the visual horror of the gore, Uh, I found it effective. It I guess weird thing to say, but like it's appropriate given the subject matter. If
Yeah.
like this is a show about a guy who crushed tons of people with a car, like yeah, I'd say showing is gross. Obviously, like I'm not glad that I saw it, but it's like if you're going to use gore in a show and in like a serious show, that would be an appropriate time to do it.
Yeah. I agree. I completely agree. That opening sequence really messed me up. I thought it was really, really well done. Actually, like it's such a great hook into the show.
Hmm.
Of just like kind of tried to close my eyes and imagine what it would have been like to watch the show, having never read the book before, and
Hmm.
just like what that sequence would have played for you, because it is shocking and horrifying. And then yeah, they don't hold back with the violence of it. Like we see this dead woman with her dead baby, like that again. Like I read all this, and there is something just about the visual medium sometimes where it just really you're forced to reckon with it. Um,
Hmm.
and
Exactly.
yeah, it messed me up for sure, for
Yep.
sure.
Yep. Me too.
And I felt like one of the things they did, and I think this was in the story, but not in the same way, that it wasn't just that this case went unsolved when he retired that was eating at him, but like this idea that this case in particular,
Hmm.
like even before Brady reaches out to him, just like the horror of this case really fucked Bill up. And again, I think that existed in the book, but I feel like we leaned more heavily into it in the television show.
Yeah, I agree with that. In the book, it seemed like he had all these cases that were unsolved, and he was kind of bothered by all of them. But it really makes a lot of sense, right? Like a detective, you got to imagine. Not that I really know anything about detectives, but you got to imagine that in a typical major city, there's not a lot of like huge massacres.
Mm-hmm.
One would hope. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, right? But like typically, you're solving like a murder, or
Yeah.
not a mass murder.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that that would, and just sort of the like senselessness of it, right? Like the evil of it, right? Like that's I don't think they say that word in the show, but he says it in the book where it's like Brady is evil,
Yeah.
and there's a I think that's what bothers Bill about this is like it's there's no reason for this. It's just an evil human being full of hate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I love in the Skype conversation between the two of them when Brendan Gleeson first calls him a motherfucker and Brady loses it and
Uh-huh.
gets really pissed off, and the look of joy and happiness on Bill's face as he's just realized that he was right about that
Uh-huh.
is just absolutely delightful. Absolutely delightful. I love Brendan Gleeson. I
Me
really
too.
love him. He's so good.
I love him too. I agree. It was great. All of my complaints about Hodges is just the way they chose to do the character, not
Mhm.
Gleason's performance. Yes.
I love the turtle, and I love like the fact that the whole time you're like, why the fuck does Bill Hodges have a turtle?
Hmm.
And then it's not till near the end of the season that you realize, oh, it was his daughter's turtle, and he's just like been taking care of the turtle since then.
Exactly. That was a nice um moment. I
Hmm.
like that actually.
Yeah.
For all my complaining about his character, that was one thing where I was like, okay, yeah, if you're going to do this kind of character, then that's a good way of kind of tipping your hand that he has these regrets. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. One more thing I didn't like is when Holly spilled out the theme of the book to us
Uh huh.
when she's trying to argue why he's going to attack the job fair. I think she says something to the effect of like he mowed down people just looking for work and hope with the symbol of opulence and extravagance. It's
Yeah.
like thanks Holly, appreciate that.
Uh huh.
We got that. Thank you.
Yeah. He's mowing down hope. I think was yeah. I agree. Not my favorite.
Yeah, but overall, really good show. I myself am debating just diving right into seasons 2 and 3 from here. I don't know. I have so much other television to watch right now. We got the new season of Rings of Power to watch, so it might not be right away, but I do want to eventually check out these following 2 seasons.
Um, Yeah, not a top priority for me, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll spoil it all for you.
All right.
All right, Matt, that is it for us this week. And that is it for Mr. Mercedes and Stephen King's crime fiction. Next week, oh gosh, this is going to be weird to say, Matt. Next week, it's the beginning of the end as we start our final book in the Kingslinger series. This is it.
We're going to be reading Fairy Tale.
Yeah. Fairy Tale. A book that neither Matt nor I have read, to remind you all once again that the gimmick on our final show, our final series of the show is going to be that Matt and I are going to be in the same place. Neither of us have read this novel before. We will be both experiencing it as we go. It's going to change quite a bit. The biggest thing is that the chapter breaks are done completely at random, based solely on page number. I have not, of course, made any kind of decision-making process around that, which is not too different from how it normally goes, but it's a little bit different. So it's going to be interesting. I've already read like 10 to 15 pages, Matt, and I'm highlighting things, but I'm like already saying to myself, well, how do I know if this is important?
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know we've got a lot of people with mixed reactions to this book, and that's okay. I think we thought it would be a fitting end for the show for multiple reasons. One, we talked about neither of us have read it, so we get to be on level playing field. Two, it feels like the birth of the show was the Dark Tower, so it feels right that a conclusion of the show would be on a book that is supposed to be more fantasy leaning, possibly exist within a world other than these. Just feels thematically right. I don't know the themes of the book, so we'll see how much that holds up, but it just felt like the right decision for us.
Yeah, I feel like it's one that I wanted to read anyway, honestly, because
same, yeah.
Kind of return to our roots in Midworld, assuming my understanding of this book is
thinking
correct.
It's Midworld, and I'm not being coy here now, where I can say like, oh, are you sure about that, Matt? I just legitimately don't know, and I'm confused as to how you're so incredibly confident that this is the case.
Because of the cover, Scott. Because of the
That's
cover
it
of the book.
So what you're saying is, here, after 200 and something episodes, you are judging a book by its cover.
This is literary analysis.
All right. Well, that analysis will begin officially next week as we cover chapters 1 through 5 of Stephen King's Fairy Tale. Please join us there. You don't want to miss it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be a little different, but it will be a lot of fun. And hey, if you missed the announcement next week, we did announce officially what we're doing after we finish with Fairy Tale. We are going to be covering the work of Mike Flanagan as we move through all of the movies and television shows Mike Flanagan has created, and of course the books that he has adapted those things off. So yes, we will be reading a little bit more Stephen King as we read both Dr. Sleep and Gerald's Game, but that is going to be a new show on a new feed with a new name called Flanagan's Wake. So we'll keep updating you folks as we get closer and closer to that, but just wanted to remind you of that. But in the meantime, we got Fairy Tale. So let's get started with that.
All right. Sounds good. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or over on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the best place to hang out with other listeners is on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia.
A lot of activity on the subreddit over the last week. Good to see.
Yeah, people seem to be excited about Flanagan's Wake, which makes me even more excited than I already was, which was pretty excited.
Yeah. If you're not already subscribed to Kingslingers, now is the time to do it. At the very end. Make sure you do it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere where there's podcasts.
Yeah. If you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia.
And if you cannot afford to donate, that is fine. There are plenty of ways to help us out. There will be tons more ways once we launch Flanagan's Wake. But for now, please keep sharing Kingslingers with all your Stephen King loving friends. We're starting a new book. We're starting Fairy Tale, and that is a perfect time to bring someone else on board. Also, you can always send us rating and reviews. This week's spotlight review comes from Sabatology, who gives us 5 stars and said, I found this podcast during the first season when they were about 3/4 of the way through. I was able to catch up as they got to the end of the path of the first season, which was my 4th trip to the tower at the time. These guys really helped me re-experience the tower journey in a deeper manner by their great commentary and insight for each segment. I've since gone to the tower twice, and one of those was with the Kingslingers again. I recently completed the 2nd season, and I've just started the 3rd. It's a little hard to stay current with the podcast because I am a voracious audiobook reader and don't like to bounce around. Therefore, what I usually do is create a version of the audiobook with their Kingslinger segments inserted at the appropriate places. This way, I can just hit play and go. That's very cool. I like that.
I'm impressed by people who can do that because I'm not entirely sure how you do that, but good job. That's cool. Yeah. That's fun.
They go on to say, what they've done with the study of King and his books is utterly fantastic. This could surely be turned into a college course somewhere. Maybe that's your future, guys. I doubt that. Hopefully, you continue to do the remainder of King's works and other important works in the same deep, thorough manner. Well, sort of.
Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Get excited. Thank you so much, Sabatology, for that very, very kind review. And thank you to everyone who keeps those reviews, emails, comments, everything you've been sending our way over the past few weeks, especially your reaction to that announcement. That warms our heart. We really do appreciate that. So please keep them coming. We love to see them.
Yep.
All right, folks, that is it for this week. That is it for Mr. Mercedes. Next week, Fairy Tale. Let's do it. The final book. I'm excited. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.